Our speaker and registered dietitian and certified diabetes care and education specialist, Nicole Vas. She has been providing nutrition counseling and diabetes education for over 30 years. And throughout that time, she's worked in many different settings throughout the Bay Area, including hospitals, diabetes clinics, home care, and pharmacies. She is deeply passionate about advocating for patients, particularly those who face socioeconomic barriers to diabetes care and resources. We here at CHRC is over the moon to have her join us today. Thank you so much for joining us from Alta Bates Summit Medical Center, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you, Twin. So here's my cute little slide. We're going to begin with reviewing the physiology of diabetes and normal physiology. So this is showing how the body normally works. So typically we wake up in the morning and blood sugars, what is normal blood sugars is that we wake up with a blood sugar level between 70 and 100 is what's considered a normal fasting blood sugar level. And that's simply your blood sugar level first thing in the morning from not having any food, since the time you go to bed. So that's what we're calling the fasting. There's not, a very specific hour to it, but 70 to 100 is what's normal waking up. And then after eating a meal, 140. Now, typically a blood sugar peaks at 1 hour after the meal. And what's considered normal is to be below 140 at 1 hour. Then we've got our little pancreas. Here it's showing, trying to get my cursor to work. Here we go. The little pancreas here then secretes insulin and brings it back down. So we wake up at a nice steady blood sugar. I call it our walking around blood sugar of around 80. Every time we eat a meal, some food will digest and make the blood sugar level rise. Then the pancreas secretes insulin and brings it back down. So here again, it's showing the pancreas secreting insulin. And we often show insulin like it's a key because it is simply a signaler. So insulin is a hormone or a protein that targets all the cells of our body. And it tells your cells, absorb the glucose. So that's the normal. We get our glucose out of our bloodstream and into our cells. So again, we have to eat our glucose, right? So we eat food, it digests, it leaves the stomach, enters the bloodstream, and then from the bloodstream, it's supposed to be absorbed by your cells. Now down here in the bottom picture is where the glucose is just sitting in the blood. So the glucose is elevated in the bloodstream. And so that's, what is diabetes? Diabetes is simply too much sugar in the bloodstream. It's in the wrong spot. Our blood carries glucose from our blood and it carries it to the cells, but it's not supposed to stay high in the blood for very long. It's supposed to come right back down after we eat. So here's the state of diabetes, is just that the glucose levels are concentrated in the blood. Okay, so when we're talking about putting the glucose into the cells, now it is there's a bar above here. I'm just not sure if you guys, is this disrupting everyone's screen or just my screen?
I don't see anything on my end.
Good. Okay. All right. Then it looks fine for you guys. All righty. Sorry about that. All right. So here it's showing the little blue dot is insulin. And again, it's telling the cells to absorb glucose. And the triangles here is the glucose entering the cells. So I put this slide in here to try to kind of explain insulin resistance, right? That's it's an expression that we hear a lot. I was just listening to an advertisement on television talking about insulin resistance. And they always make it sound so, so difficult to understand. But really, it's just a matter of that the cells are very full of calories. So it's thought that some of us have a more limited capacity for storage of calories inside our cells than others, which seems to be kind of a genetic trait. Some people are able to store calories without any problems. there are people in this world that are 600 to 1,000 pounds that store plenty of calories and still do not have diabetes. So they're great at storing calories. And it seems that their cells have a great capacity to just store a lot of calories. The cells divide and they just store and they store more calories. But then there's some of us, and it does have a genetic component, that we have a more limited capacity for storage. And so when we have this problem where we can't continue to store and store and store calories, our cells basically get kind of full, and then we resist taking up more calories. So that's what we're calling insulin resistance. What it means is that we make insulin, and the insulin is supposed to be the trigger to store calories, but the cells are resisting taking up more calories, so that it sits in the bloodstream. So it's really just kind of a fancy way of saying that the cells are too full. So if your body has a low fitness level, there can be insulin resistance, because basically we're not burning the calories in our cells, and the cells are saying, all right, there's no more room to store extra calories. Oh dear. Okay. There we go. The screen got frozen there for a sec. Okay, so now the organs, there's other organs that regulate blood glucose. So we were talking quite a bit about the pancreas, and the pancreas, is the main organ in diabetes. Deep inside the pancreas, there's little beta cells in here, very specialized cells that produce insulin for us. So again, the pancreas is the main organ that produces insulin. So there are people with type 2 diabetes where we don't maybe have enough beta cells that make insulin. So some people are insufficient with how much insulin they make. But then there's also the liver. So the liver's job is to store extra calories, primarily glucose. So when the pancreas produces insulin and we store that glucose, the main place that the calories are stored and that the glucose is stored is in the liver. Think of your liver as like your gas tank. So your liver stores up a lot of glucose. And then when you need glucose to be released back into the bloodstream, that's what your liver does. So the pancreas secretes insulin in order to store the glucose within the liver. And then the liver takes it from there. And it's really your liver that regulates your glucose the most. The pancreas just makes the storage hormone, then the liver stores it, and then the liver will put glucose back into the bloodstream as you need to. Then, of course, there's your muscle cells and your fat cells. So the other cells of your body. We need to have a good amount of muscles so that we can burn calories. And if we're not very physically fit and we don't have a lot of muscle cells, well, there's another reason why the glucose is just kind of sitting around in the bloodstream, because we don't have a need to use it. So I brought the liver into this because today's lecture, we're talking about diet for diabetes and for fatty liver. So fatty liver and diabetes most of the time goes hand in hand. And fatty liver has to do with too much storage in the liver, and especially too much carbohydrate. So the liver's job is to take up the carbohydrate, but if we have too much carbohydrate in the liver, then the liver will convert that carbohydrate into fat. And then that's how we get fatty liver. So it's typically an excess calories coming from carbohydrate is primarily how fatty liver gets going. Okay, so what is diabetes? What is fatty liver? So again, the glucose comes from the food you eat. The food gets digested, and glucose from the meal enters the bloodstream. After a meal, the insulin is released from the beta cells of the pancreas, and that allows your body's cells to absorb glucose. So the condition of diabetes happens when there's not enough insulin released from the pancreas to move the glucose from the blood into the cells. That's the insulin insufficiency. So it's that the pancreas is insufficient in how much insulin it's making. Or there is insulin resistance, which has to do with too much storage of calories in your liver. So in some people, so I'm talking about type 2 diabetes here, just to be clear. So type 2 diabetes, we can kind of generally break it down to two kinds of type of diabetes. Some people that have type 2 are more insulin insufficient, or some people that have type 2 diabetes are more insulin resistant, which means that they have too much storage. And some people have a mixture of both. So let me go on to explain that a little further. So when diabetes is diagnosed, it's thought that approximately 30 to 50% of the beta cells may be lost. So that most people with type 2 diabetes do have a component of having some insulin insufficiency, because then over time, then the pancreas will produce less insulin as time goes on. So the pancreas's job is to secrete insulin in order to get the glucose down. Now, but if we're walking around with a little bit elevated levels of glucose a lot of the time, and that could be because the cells are so full of calories that the cells aren't taking up that extra sugar. So we're walking around with a little elevated glucose. Then the pancreas gets triggered constantly to produce more insulin, and it starts working too hard. So it's kind of, the pancreas is working, and those beta cells are then experiencing stress, which then has the beta cells will slowly die off because they're under so much stress. So eventually, most people with diabetes do have more and more insulin insufficiency as we go along, as we age. So many people with type 2 diabetes eventually need insulin. Now, not everyone, but many people do become more and more insufficient over time. Now, what is it that drives it? What causes the beta cells inside the pancreas to become destroyed? And people always ask as well, can they ever renew themselves? Well, that's, the $1 million question. That's what we're working on. They're working on, UCSF has been doing a lot of research and trying to see if we can get the beta cells to rejuvenate. Right now, we're not able to do that, but we are able to often prevent the progression of type 2 diabetes if we're catching it early enough. So when people have type 2 diabetes because of being overweight or their liver is too full, and we start, watching diet, getting more exercise, essentially decreasing the amount of storage in the liver, and we put less stress in the pancreas, many times we can kind of stop diabetes from progressing. Can it be reversed? Sometimes diabetes is reversed if someone's pretty heavy, pretty overweight, and they're able to lose weight, and they're able to, watch their diet, get more, become more physically fit. They might be able to stabilize themselves and not have diabetes progress. Would I call that reversing diabetes? Not necessarily. I would say that, you have a body type that is prone to diabetes, and you kind of constantly need to be on top of it, always watching diet and being fit and making sure that your weight stays more stable. So here's another slide that is showing that the natural course of type 2 diabetes is that there often is a gradual loss of the beta cells that make insulin. So here it's showing that at the time of diagnosis, we're typically reduced in how much insulin we make. And then over time, the insulin secretion can diminish. So on average, after someone's had diabetes 10 to 15 years, people will start to need insulin. Again, that's not everyone, but that is common. And so that's why I know that it's often confusing to people thinking, well, I've had diabetes, for a while, and I used to control it just fine. Now I'm doing everything the same, if not even eating better. But now, doctors saying I need more medications and my A1C is rising. Why is that? And it is because diabetes does change over time. So here's the the three main pillars of diabetes control, right? We always have to, watch the diet, and physical activity is also extremely important for us to keep ourselves, really active, keep the metabolism moving. So when you're looking at diabetes, of course, we need to have a balance of both of these things to have good control, and especially if there's fatty liver involved, which is, another way of saying, well, the liver is just full. Your gas tank is so full, it's overflowing. And so you need to burn off calories. And so burning off the calories is the physical activity part. We need to be careful about what we put in our body, the diet part, and then we need to increase the physical activity so we keep the metabolism burning. Okay, so before I even like to talk about exactly what to eat, I think we really need to consider how you're eating. So this is my little joke here about, do you eat like a camel or do you eat like a goat? So these, the two extremes. So someone eating like a camel is someone who will maybe only eat one main meal or two main meals in the day. And especially if you take in your calories later at night. When we take in our calories makes a very big difference for blood sugar control and for weight. So eating like a camel is not good for you. On the other hand, eating like a goat is what I mean is like somebody that's just eating kind of constantly. Some people I have say, well, I don't really eat meals. I just kind of, nibble throughout the day, right? So then we kind of lose track of how many calories that we're getting. And we're also constantly putting glucose into the bloodstream. So you're better off, eating a meal than letting your blood sugar come back down to normal so that you have time in between your meals to have a normal blood sugar level before you eat again. So let's not do these two extremes of your eating pattern. So give that a lot of thought and really try to get yourself into a kind of a more regulated eating pattern like this. So the top circles here, this would be breakfast, lunch, maybe a snack between lunch and dinner. So I think many of us Americans were kind of raised to eat in this pattern where we just have like a little light breakfast or maybe no breakfast, an average size lunch, and then the dinner meal. For most Americans, the dinner meal is the heaviest meal of the day. And especially if you're eating late in the day, this is what really contributes to a lot of weight. So because our metabolism was slow 10 to 15% at night. So we really don't want to take in the bulk of our calories here at dinner time because we're not going to be burning these calories. So then all these extra calories at dinner time either sits in your bloodstream. So you're, kind of elevated all night long. And then the next morning you're waking up with a high fasting blood sugar that's over 100, right? So if that is your issue, check your fasting blood sugar. If you're over 100 in the morning, consider if you're eating too many calories at night. Really, this should be reversed. We should be eating, our calories earlier in the day when we're going to burn them. So your breakfast, your lunch meal, you're going to burn these calories. And when the daylight, is when the sun is shining, that's when our metabolisms are really running much more efficiently. So eat your calories when you're going to burn them. And then having perhaps a little snack in the late afternoon, if that prevents you from being too hungry, so that, to keep your dinner meal smaller is really your goal. So if you need a snack in the afternoon to keep that dinner smaller, that's not a bad way to go. It's not something that you definitely have to do. You could instead, rather than having a snack, you could just simply move your dinner meal up. But the biggest thing you want to avoid is eating more calories at night. So again, starting off with a normal fasting blood sugar is going to be the most, helpful thing to prevent diabetes from progressing and to keep that A1C lower. So the dinner meal should really be primarily vegetables, whether it's a big salad with maybe some carbs on it. or maybe big soup. I'm making soup once a week these days now that the weather is getting colder. Okay, so consider, are you getting calories from drinks? Are you drinking your calories? That's your number one thing you want to avoid, is getting calories from things like juices, Gatorade, vitamin water, Jamba juice. Some people drink a lot of milk, and that's extra calories that you don't need. So the liquids can really contribute to a lot of calories and, of course, a lot of sugar, and it doesn't make you feel full. So consider that, number one. Of course, you can also get a lot of calories from alcohol and coffee drinks. Now, just regular coffee and regular tea, that is no problem. There's hardly any calories in there, but it's, of course, what you put in it. So are you putting in, heavy cream? Are you putting in that, International Delight that has a whole lot of sugar in it? And, if you're getting significant calories from what you're putting in your coffee, then just consider just using maybe just good old fashioned 2% milk. Now the diet sodas are no problem. I don't think we should be drinking excessive amounts of them, but I think that the sugar substitutes are considered safe. Okay, so in a diet, there's three main nutrients in our foods, and they all have calories, right? So we get our calories in our food from three main components. Pretty much everything you eat will turn into either carbohydrate, protein, or fat. What else is in food? Well, there's vitamins and there's minerals in food. We're not getting calories from that, but that's our nutrition. And then, of course, there's fiber, and that's the part that we don't digest that. But where we're getting our calories is from carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So what are carbohydrates? Well, the carbohydrates is indeed what turns into glucose, right? That's what a carbohydrate is. Carbohydrate is a fancy word for glucose foods. So anything that digests and turns into glucose is a carbohydrate, including sugar. So table sugar, white granulated table sugar, is a carbohydrate. Its real name is sucrose, and its structure is its two glucose molecules linked together. So when we eat sugar, we digest it, we break the bond here, and it goes into our bloodstream as a single glucose. Then the other carbohydrates are starches, fruits, and milk. So starches, we call that complex carbohydrate, which is just a fancy word for long chains of glucose. So if you picture a baked potato with that white fluffy stuff, that's the starch. And what starch is the technical term for complex carbohydrate, which is long chains of glucose. So they're all linked together. When we digest them, we break the bond, and it goes into our bloodstream as a single glucose molecule. So starches take a little bit longer to digest than, say, these simple carbohydrates or sugars. So now other sugars would be fruits and milks. So these are natural sugars, but they are considered sugars technically in the food science world because they are short chains. And that's simply what sugar is. So there's either starch in foods or sugars, and sugars is just simply a short chain. So fruit has the sugar fructose, which either one or two glucose molecules link together. And again, short chain, so fruit is considered a sugar. Milk is considered a sugar, right? It has lactose. Lactose is two glucose molecules linked together. So now a common question I get is, well, what about lactose-free milk? Well, so lactose, the structure here is two glucose molecules linked together. Some people lack the enzyme that breaks this bond. And so then they don't digest it well, and they can get diarrhea from that. So what they do with lactose-free milk is they add an enzyme that breaks the bond for you. But the glucose doesn't magically disappear. It's just that it's not lactose now because the bond is broken, but it still contains glucose. So fruits, milks, and regular sucrose, table sugar, are considered sugars. Okay, what else do we have in foods? Well, there's proteins in food. So protein foods are things like any kind of meat, fish, eggs, cheese, and nuts, any kind of nuts. So protein foods, these do not have any carbohydrates in them at all. They are protein. So protein is just, it's a different molecule, completely different bird than carbohydrate. So these do not make your sugar go up. And then we have vegetables. So vegetables are technically a carbohydrate food, but they're very, very low. They have typically less than 5 grams of carbohydrate per serving. So they're basically free. They're very low in calories. They really don't make your blood sugar go up. They don't have a lot of proteins or fats in them at all. So your vegetables, where you get all of the nutrition, all the vitamins and minerals, but low calories. And then the last food group we have here are the fats and the oils. So fats and oils, I'm talking about things that are like oil, butter, avocado, cream cheese is in this category. We also put bacon in this category. So bacon is primarily fats. It doesn't really have very much protein in it to rate as a protein. So these are our food groups, according to our Diabetes Association, and it works well with your meal planning. So what you're looking for to plan a meal is a balanced diet, right? What you're trying to do for diabetes is not to avoid all the carbohydrates. That's not at all what you're trying to do. What you're trying to do is have a balanced meal, a reasonable meal that provides you with all the nutrients, because our body does need all the nutrients. But what we're trying to do is not have our blood sugar spike a lot after meals. So 2 things will slow down the digestion. So again, think about it that way, is that you're trying to simply eat normally, but not have a meal spike your blood sugar. So, which entails slowing down your digestion. So in a meal, if you always have a little protein gives you satiety in your stomach, and it has you digest your foods a little bit slower, and especially it has you digest your carbohydrates slower. So always have a little bit of protein at every meal. Now, I'm not talking about a high protein diet per se, but just 1 to 2 ounces at breakfast, 2 to 3 ounces at lunch and dinner. So 3 ounces of protein looks like a deck of cards. If you really visualize a deck of cards, it's only about 1 inch thick and maybe 2 inches by 3 inches. So it's small. So we don't need a lot of protein, but we do need it at every meal, because protein within your meal will again slow down the digestion of these other carbs, or of these carbs, and then you digest your food more slowly. Then your pancreas can keep up with the spike in blood sugar. So the protein helps, and then also, of course, vegetables. So 2 main things that help to slow down the digestion is having protein in the meal and fiber. So the fiber is where you're going to get more fiber from your vegetables. And then also you should be getting a lot of fiber from your carbohydrates if your carbohydrates are unprocessed. Okay, we'll go back to this one again. All right, how much carbohydrate should a person eat? So here it's showing again what starch is and what is a portion size. So we define a portion of carbohydrate as being 15 grams of carbohydrate. So that's very useful to keep as your rule of thumb to understand how much you should be eating. Now, most starches will fit into a volume of about 1/2 cup to 1/3 of a cup, and that provides you with 15 grams of carbohydrate. So that's how you count a portion of starch. Counting a portion of fruit, it's about 1 cup about the size of a small person's fist, or generally like one piece of fruit, like one apple generally gives you about 15 grams of carbohydrate. So now, all fruits turn into sugars. Some fruit has more sugar than others. So your tropical fruits usually have more sugar, and you have to watch that portion size more meticulously. So a banana is typically 2 carbohydrate portions, or 30 grams. Milk typically has about 15 grams of carbohydrate in 1 cup. So 1 cup of milk has about the same carbohydrate amount as, say, a piece of bread. Okay, so now, again, you're looking at, okay, how saw the portions, and you're seeing what is a carbohydrate. Now, how much should I be eating? The question should be, how much should I eat per meal, not per day? Because what you're trying to do is kind of break up your carbohydrates and spread the load. You don't want to eat a whole lot of carbohydrate all by itself within 1 meal, right? So an example of a meal that really makes people spike would be something like cold cereal, which would be a starch, plus fruit like a banana and milk. That would be having your carbohydrate, your starch, along with your fruit and some milk, and so you're just having sugar and sugar and sugar. A meal like that will typically spike somebody's blood sugar up to 300. So don't eat like that. What you want is to maybe lead with something like an egg and toast. So a piece of bread just has 15 grams of carbohydrate. So if you're looking at targeting anywhere from 15 grams of carbohydrate up to 45 grams of carbohydrate per meal, that tends to work. So 15 grams is a fairly low carbohydrate meal. But see, I'm not saying that we need to avoid all the carbs, but we do need some. That is how, humans' metabolisms run. Deep inside our cells, our metabolisms run on glucose and protein and fats at all times. Okay, so use your labels. So here's, when you're looking at a label, the first thing you do is you look up at the top and it says, what's the portion size? So 1 cup of this food, this mystery food here, has total carbohydrate of 31 grams. So, okay, that's within the realm of 15 to 45 grams per meal. So if you ate 1 cup of this, that's a decent amount of carbohydrate. And then what about sugars? So sugars is listed underneath this, and it's indented. So this sugars amount is part of the total carbohydrate number. Now, does this make this a bad food? Not necessarily, just because it has some sugars in it. But remember that milk and fruits are both listed as sugar, so or are considered sugar. So if something has fruit or milk in it, it will have sugars on the label. So I don't necessarily recommend you look at sugars per se. You want to look at what is the total carbohydrate in a food. And if you're wondering are they adding extra sugars, then go to the ingredient list and see if they've added sugars. So that's how you want to kind of, use your labels, look at your total carbohydrate, and then try to keep within about 15 to 45 grams per meal. Now, I use that 45 grams per meal as typically the largest amount of carbohydrate that someone can typically get away with. So how do you know if you can, how much carbohydrate you can eat? That's where you go back to use your glucose monitoring. So if you test it 1 hour after a meal and you see how much your blood sugar peaks, if you can stay within, a limit, then you know that meal worked for you. So earlier when I was giving you glucose levels, I was giving you what the normal glucose levels are. So let's review that. Normal glucose levels before eating is 70 to 100. Now, when someone has diabetes, the recommendation is to keep your blood sugar below 130 before the meal or for fasting. So that's what you don't necessarily have to have normal blood sugar levels to have good blood sugar control for diabetes. But what's reasonable is to keep it below 130 for someone that has diabetes. Then after the meal, what's normal is 140. But when you have diabetes, we want to keep it at a reasonable level, and that level is below 180. So what you're doing with this, with diet control, is you're, keeping your carbs somewhere between 15 to 45 grams, and then test it 1 hour after meal and seeing if you can keep that in a reasonable level. See if you can keep that below 180. Okay. If you're below 180, then you're saying, okay, that works. That meal works for me. Now, sometimes people are more sensitive to that and they can't eat quite 45 grams. So then maybe you need to cut it down to 30 grams. If you ever get to the point where if you're eating only 15 grams of carbohydrate and you're going over 180, that's the point where you know for sure that it's time to add some medications. Okay, I put this slide in here because I get this question a lot. People asking me, well, what's the difference between a whole grain and whole wheat? What's up with that? Well, so wheat is just one of the grains, right? So, and then the whole part has to do with it's not being processed. So if this is a wheat seed or grain, that is, wheat is a grain. When it's a whole grain, it hasn't been processed. It still has the fiber intact on the outside of the grain. It has the endosperm down in here, or it has the germ, and then the endosperm is where a lot of the starch is. So what makes it a whole grain is simply that it's not processed. So in the processing, they remove the bran, and then we're only left with the starch part inside. And then this also the other healthy part of the grain is removed, the germ part. So it's primarily only starch left behind. And it's the white part of your, white bread. So this can be an example of a whole wheat grain, but then there's, of course, other grains. There's rice. So whole rice would be, brown rice, black rice, red rice. There's a lot of rice in the world. There's also, rye is a grain. There's oats, there's quinoa. So anytime that you just have the grain itself and it has not been processed, that's what we call whole grain. So whole grain is really very healthy. It's where we primarily get our B vitamins and fiber. So your typical serving of a whole grain food is generally about 5 grams or more, 5 to 7 grams of fiber per serving. So when people eat mostly processed food, then we're not getting nearly enough fiber. So hopefully that clears that up. Okay, so to review, our food groups that are carbohydrates, again, carbohydrate is the component that digests and turns into glucose. These carbohydrate foods, starches, fruits, milk, and yogurt. So considering what the form of the carbohydrate is it starch or is it sugar? If we're eating a lot of sugars, like a lot of fruit, maybe mixed with yogurt and fruit together, that would be 100% simple carbohydrate, and you would digest that pretty quickly. So it's actually not really a great combination. When I have fruit and I want to have some protein with it, rather than having yogurt, I reach for something like cottage cheese. That's a good substitute. And then consider the role of processing and the fiber, the digestibility of the foods that you're eating. Does it cause your blood sugar to spike? So we talked about, again, the standard portion of carbohydrate is 15 grams of total carbohydrate. And generally we count those carbs by volume. So a half a cup of a starch most starches will be right around a half a cup would give you 15 grams. And then you're wondering, well, how much carbohydrate can I tolerate in a meal? And again, that's where you can use your glucose meter to see how much carbohydrate can you get away with, right? If your body is more insulin insufficient, generally you need to start eating even less carbs. But at some point, if you become so insufficient in your insulin, then I don't recommend going below 15 grams of carbohydrate per meal, because we shouldn't have to, follow the Atkins diet in order to have good blood sugar control. The Atkins diet, where we're not eating any carbs, that's not a sustainable or a healthy diet for the long term. So the plate method is what we've been kind of using as just a real quick rule of thumb for meal planning. So if this is a lunch meal, well, any meal really, half of your plate should be vegetables. So that's primarily what we should be filling up our stomachs on. So a good way to think about meal planning is, say, dinner, have a fresh vegetable like salad and a cooked vegetable. So have 2 vegetables in your dinner meal. That way you fill up primarily on your healthy foods and fiber, and then just make a quarter of your plate some carbs. So this could be like a small to medium potato. It could be a half a cup of rice. It could be, 1 or 2 pieces of bread. And then your meats or your protein, again, they're just a quarter of your plate. And so this is where you're recommending about 2 to 3 ounces. So we don't need much. It could be 2 ounces of salmon, which is, very small. Salmon, we often overeat. Most portions that are served or even sold in the grocery store are more like 6 to 8 ounces. So that can really have a lot of calories. So keep your protein portions smaller, but do have it with your meal, and then balance it out with your carbohydrates and focus much more on vegetables. So if this were a breakfast meal, what would work here would be, instead of meats, it could be eggs, and then maybe having a lot of veggies in your eggs. So it could be like an omelet with a whole bunch of veggies in the omelet, or an egg scramble and a couple pieces of toast. For lunch, it could be a sandwich, and keeping your carbs closer to 30 grams for that meal. You'd want to be mindful about the size of your bread. So the size of 1950s bread, I call it, where the breads are a little smaller, not the 20-gram breads. We've been having a creep of portion sizes getting bigger and bigger. And, so to watch the portion sizes, keeping the bread closer to 12 to 15 grams per slice. So let's say you have 2 pieces of bread, and then you have some meats or tuna or egg or peanut butter. And so then that's a balanced meal. But what you want to do again is at lunchtime is to bring in some veggies. So perhaps you do a side of coleslaw. I like to use coleslaw a lot because I can make up a batch of coleslaw and it can last in my refrigerator for a week. And then, lunch is ready really quickly. And of course, you can always add, a piece of fruit. So if you're having 2 pieces of bread and fruit, that meal becomes 3 portions, or also 45 grams of carbohydrate. Then you circle back, test your blood sugar at 1 hour, and see where your blood sugar is. If you're below 180, you say, okay, great, I can get away with eating 45 grams of carbohydrate. If you're over 180, then you say to yourself, I got to cut down my carbs. So maybe you have an open face sandwich and a piece of fruit, and then that's closer to 30 grams of carbohydrate. Okay, well, I thought this would just be kind of a fun slide to throw in. It's just some quick food tips. So eat this, don't eat this type of thing. So on this side, fun things to drink that are going to be no problem. They all have less than 5 grams of carbohydrate, which is considered a free food. Any food that has less than 5 grams of carbohydrate is not enough to worry about. So you can include those things. So diet sodas, flavored seltzer, non-sweetened tea, any kind of drink. There's all kinds of drinks out there. Somebody was showing me a coconut drink the other day that actually had like 18 grams of carbohydrate, but the label was misleading. It said 9 grams of carbohydrate per serving. And then she looked at the serving size and it was 2 portions. So of course, 18 grams. And, it was marketed as if you're going to just drink it for, 1 portion, but it was supposed to be 2 portions. So I always look at that portion size there. Okay, wheat bread with peanut butter. Now that's a good fast breakfast. You don't have to do a lot of cooking. You don't have to put a lot of effort into food, but your peanut butter is your protein mixed with wheat bread. This nice gooey, heavier peanut butter will hold down the digestion of this wheat bread, and blood sugars are often really nice and steady after a little breakfast meal like this. Or it can be an English muffin with peanut butter. So English muffins are a nice substitute. If you don't feel like eating whole wheat bread and being perfect all the time, an English muffin is usually not a problem. It doesn't spike blood sugars. It's sourdough. Sourdough does not tend to spike blood sugars, as much as your average white bread. And English muffins, the total amount of the whole thing is only 24 grams. So they have a lot of holes in them. So it's a nice substitute instead of don't eat pastries, right? Berries is a good way to go for fruits. Berries are all low sugar fruits. Cottage cheese or Greek yogurt. So cottage cheese doesn't have any carbs. Greek yogurt is about half the amount of carbs that regular yogurt has, but it is still, a fair amount of carbohydrate. So you might need to test your blood sugar after eating this one, but those are a nice substitute for regular yogurt. Try more whole grains. Wild rice is a really good healthy food. Corn is a good food. I buy a lot of corn, frozen corn, and then I'll add it to soups. I'll throw it on a salad. So corn, yes, it's a starch, it's a carbohydrate, but it's a whole grain. It has a lot of fiber in it and it doesn't digest very quickly. And then there's quinoa. So quinoa is a grain that has a lot of fiber and a little bit higher in protein than rice does. So that's a nice substitute as well. So other side dishes, beans, lentils, peas. Peas are a starch. They're like lentils or beans, but again, it's a whole food. It has plenty of fiber in it. It doesn't digest fast. It does give you some carbohydrate, but it also gives you a lot of nutrition. And then, of course, all veggies are good. The more veggies, the better. So the foods over here on the other side, don't drink your calories. Things like smoothies. Even if they're, homemade, I don't recommend it. It usually takes 2 to 3 to 4 servings of fruit in a smoothie, and we really shouldn't be eating so much. We really want to take our time with eating. I don't think it's good to drink your calories because then you just get too many calories too fast. So if you're eating a piece of fruit, it takes longer. Your tummy and your brain has time to register that you're feeling full and enjoy it instead of drinking things down. I kind of hate that Costco as they come along with making like all these, the bullet and having everybody start doing their juicing. I don't believe in juicing at all. We get too many concentrated calories with juicing. If you just absolutely love juicing, sure, you can juice vegetables and, not get nearly as many calories, but I still think it's better for us to take our time chewing and swallowing and enjoying the crunch of vegetables rather than drink it down. All juice is considered junk food. Again, even homemade juice, because it will take 3 to 4 oranges to make a glass of juice. Obviously, soda pop is terrible for us, and it's what really drives diabetes. People that, have been drinking soda for many years almost always end up developing diabetes. So I love that Berkeley has a soda tax. I think we all should. Gatorade, vitamin water. There's so many drinks out there now. The food companies are just making a lot of money on liquid sugars. So sweet flavored creamer, terrible stuff for you. Don't eat it. Boxed cold cereal is what we consider ultra processed food. So ultra processed food is what, it's double processing. So if you think about Cheerios, for instance, not even the Honey Nut Cheerios, but just regular plain Cheerios is considered ultra processed. So they take the oats, they process it a lot, they break it up, and then that's already the first stage of processing. But then they come along with the cold cereal and they puff it and then they flake it. So the puffing and flaking process makes the digestibility of cereals very high. So that's the opposite of what we want, right? When we digest something really quickly, it spikes your blood sugar much faster than your little pancreas can keep up with. So I have not found a single boxed cold cereal that works, including Trader Joe's. I just don't eat them. You're going to get far fewer grams of carbohydrate from just eating a piece of bread than the cold cereals. Bagels. Bagels are like eating 5 pieces of bread. They're just very, very dense. So if you must have a bagel now and then, just eat half. Pastries and muffins. So pastries and muffins, are bread products, but then they're added with tons of fat in them. And they're, just super bad for you. So people think that bread is so bad, but bread is actually a pretty good deal. It's really the pastries and then the really dense things and the very processed types of starches that are bad for us. High sugar fruits, just beware of them, maybe cut them down. I wouldn't say avoid them altogether, but bananas is one of the sweetest fruits we can get. Again, 30 grams of carbohydrate per banana. They're not high in vitamin C. They're not particularly high in fiber. So you're better off going with berries. Pineapple is as well higher in sugar and lower in vitamin C, as well as grapes. So just watch your fruit intake of these tropical fruits. And then, of course, sweetened yogurt is pretty much just junk food. So we just want to go with more like plain yogurt or unsweetened yogurt. Okay. Sugar substitutes. So the FDA, of course, regulates sugar substitutes. The low calorie sweeteners, they are safe. Back when we had saccharin was known to cause cancer in laboratory animals, but only when eaten at super high levels. And generally, we don't really eat very much saccharin anymore because we have much better sweeteners. So aspartame is the blue one that's the equal. It's made with 2 amino acids linked together. So basically, it tastes sweet in our tongue. It tastes very sweet on our tongue, so we use much, much less. And then when we digest it, your body just looks at it like it's a protein and it doesn't spike your blood sugars. And then there's also more natural things. There's actually a lot of things in the world that have some sweetening value that have very low calories. And then there's sucralose and there's Splenda that are like a sugar alcohol. So basically we don't digest them. They taste sweet on our tongue, but we don't digest them. Okay, what about alcohol? Pure alcohol actually does not have any sugar. People often think that alcohol has sugar because it's made from sugar. So when we put yeast with sugar, the yeast eats up all the alcohol and it turns the sugar into alcohol. But then the alcohol itself, the molecule, the body sees it more like a fat and it does not raise your blood sugar level. Alcohol, of course, does still have calories. They don't magically disappear, but the sugar is changed into an alcohol molecule that does still have calories. But see, white wine has about 120 calories per 6 ounces. And it has approximately 3, I can't see that. There we go. It has approximately 3 or 4 grams of sugar or of carbohydrate per glass. Red wine might have just slightly more carbs, but see, they're under 5 grams of carbohydrate. So they're considered free. So very low carbohydrate. And then pure alcohol, like a vodka or a whiskey, has no carbohydrates whatsoever. Now, again, they still have calories. Then we have beer. Now, beer is a different bird. Beer does have carbohydrates. The yeast doesn't completely eat up all of the sugar or all of the starch in the process of making beer. So beer will have some carbs, and it has just about as many carbohydrates as, say, a piece of bread. And this is a really thick Guinness stout beer. If you're looking at a light beer, it will have typically around about 5 to 8 grams of carbohydrate. So much less carbohydrate in the light beers. Okay, so to summarize kind of all this stuff, again, I'm talking about your style of eating. Give that a lot of thought. Your dinner meal should be the lightest meal of the day. So eat 2 to 3 meals a day. You don't necessarily have to have 3, but I would highly recommend having breakfast and lunch. Balance all of your meals with protein. Increase your veggies. Have half your plate of veggies. Limit your fruits to 2 times a day. You don't need more nutrition. You don't need more vitamin C than that, especially if you're getting enough vegetables. So try to get more of your vitamins and minerals from your veggies and less from fruits, because the fruits have your sugar. Don't drink your calories, and make your dinner the lightest meal of your day. Okay, snacks. Do we need them? Sometimes we need them if we're going a long period of time and then we're getting over hungry, so the next meal is too big. On the other hand, we don't necessarily need them. I think that the trend in the last probably 20 years in America has been much more snacking, and I think that's why we have so much more weight gain in our country. But when we do eat our snacks, make them count. They should be a mini meal. They should be a source of additional nutrients, not just, mindless eating. And although, I wouldn't say that we can't have any snacks, we need to have some enjoyment out of food for sure, but just, being more mindful. So a good snack would be unprocessed carbohydrate. So something like Triscuits, or perhaps wheat thins or rye crisp types of crackers, plus some protein. So if you're looking at cheese and crackers, that's, a nice healthy thing to eat in between a meal if you really need it. It might be needed if you're going to exercise. If you're taking a type of hypoglycemic medication for diabetes. Now, what does that mean? Type of medication that really makes your blood sugar go down, like a sulfonylurea, like a glipizide. That's a type of medication that can give you low blood sugar. So if you're going to exercise and your blood sugar is on the low side, you might need a snack before exercise. So if you're taking that type of a pill, or if you're taking insulin, you need to be mindful of where your blood sugar is before you go and exercise. Okay, and so that's the end of my presentation. I thought I would stop here and take questions.
There are 2 participants who have questions about alternative milk here. So the question is soy milk better than cow milk? Or in general, are alternative milks better than the normal lactose milk or lactose-free milk that you were talking about?
So milk is really the gold standard. The reason why we drink milk, or that so many people have had milk through, since the dawn of man, is primarily for the calcium. So we absorb the calcium out of milk very well. It's, very digestible for us. But soy and oat and rice and all these alternatives really don't naturally have calcium in it. So what they've done is they've had to add calcium. And typically the calcium that's added to those types of products is not nearly as well absorbed as milk itself. So I would say that milk is really still the gold standard. And if you can tolerate it, simply drink milk. Oh, and then the other one is almond milk, right? So almonds, I do worry that, almonds is not really sustainable. They're a very thirsty tree, and I think it's kind of wasteful to drink almond milk. So I think more and more hopefully we'll be getting away from drinking almond milk. Now, if you can't tolerate milk, if you're lactose intolerant, then you could have lactose free, where again, they're going to, put the enzyme in there and then you can tolerate that. If you're allergic to milk and you really need an alternative, soy milk does have less carbohydrate. So, that if you're worrying about the carbohydrate grams in it, that could work. Soy or oat milk and rice milk are actually pretty high in carbs. Most of those are. So yeah, I would just go back to primarily drinking milk if you can tolerate it.
Thank you for that. More questions related to food, and then we'll get to our other questions here. Talking about the lists of food that we can eat or should eat because they're healthier. Does the English muffin have to be whole wheat as well?
No, I haven't seen much of a difference. I've had people, what I mean by that is people eating a whole wheat and then eating just the regular white one and checking their blood sugar at 1 hour after, and is negligible difference. So I think with sourdough in general, sourdough doesn't tend to spike as much as like a French bread or just a regular white bread.
Okay, would you give an example of tasty alternative such as protein?
So Greek yogurt will have some protein, but maybe you want to increase it. How about slivered almonds? Slivered almonds, and then maybe blueberries. So having, some fruit. So blueberries are great, right? They're super healthy and they're pretty low in sugar. So golly, that sounds really yummy. I think I'm gonna eat that for breakfast tomorrow.
It sounds really great to me too. Lois wants to know if there should be a little oil with each meal.
That's a good question, huh? Usually, when we're cooking stuff, we're just adding some oils anyway. I don't think we need to really work at adding oils. Typically, we get enough in just the natural food sources. So grains have a little bit in them. That's why we make oil from things like corn oil, right? So we get some natural oils from our foods in the first place, primarily grains and seeds, and fat, or there's plenty of fats in protein. So no, I don't think you don't really need to add much. It's usually the other way around, that it's hard to keep the oils low in a meal. But if you're using non-stick pans or pans that you don't have to add too much oil to, when you add oils, canola oil or olive oil are the better ones to use because they're healthier. They do have a low smoke point, which means that if you want to kind of pan fry something at a high temperature, they often will make your pans kind of gummy. So maybe in that case, use just maybe a little bit of corn oil so that you can cook that at a higher temperature. But yeah, no, you don't have to work at adding more oils to things usually.
I agree with you there. And what are your thoughts on 5 serving of vegetables and 5 serving of fruits? So 10 servings per day.
Well, so the the recommendation is saying 5 a day of fruits and vegetables. So I just wanted to say that first, that maybe that might have been the confusing thing. That's what, is the recommendation, 5 a day of fruits and vegetables. I think what a lot of people hear, though, they hear 5 a day of fruits, and then they don't hear the vegetables part. So what I try to really kind of push is having at least 3 veggies a day and no more than 2 fruits. So that's kind of that's the rule of thumb, 5 a day of vegetables and fruit. Now, what's my thought on having more? Sure, you can always have more, right? The more the merrier.
Thank you for that, Nicole. And this is the last question about food. What are your thoughts on tofu?
Yeah, I always forget about tofu. I would not worry about it for, estrogen levels and stuff like that. I think that's kind of in the past. We've pretty much negated that it's a problem for like hormonal levels. It's a complete protein. So it's a very good alternative food, super healthy, low fat, high protein. Certainly you get enough protein by using tofu in place of meats.
This next question is about insulin. How can one find out if the diabetes is insulin insufficient or insulin resistant?
Yeah, we always want to let's see, is there a way to know? Yeah, is the problem that where we have too many body stores? Okay, so essentially, if you're insulin resistant, it has much more to do with a liver that's full and other cells that are full too, but it's primarily that the liver is stuffed with calories. So one clue is that your blood sugar might be higher in the morning, because if the liver's really full, it starts putting out too much glucose in the morning. But it's just a clue. Because if you're insulin insufficient, you might not be making enough insulin to keep the glucose stored in the liver as well. So I'm not sure it's completely knowable if you're insulin insufficient or not. But I think if you go through maybe a week or two of having lower carbs, of say 15 to 30 grams per meal, and you get some exercise, and you kind of go through a period of where you feel like you're leaning out, when you first start losing some weight, where you lose the weight first is typically in the liver. So you might not see it necessarily in your pant size or even on the scale, but you start feeling thinner on the inside, right? Bend over to tie your shoes and you don't feel like you're stuffed. Okay, so you're leaning your liver out. And then you test your blood sugars after meals, and your blood sugars are not going up very high because you're able to store those calories. So that means that I don't like the expression, but that's what they keep saying, insulin resistance. It's meaning, again, that you make insulin. It's just that your body is too full of calories. So you kind of go through some period of time where you decrease your storage, you clear your body out of this extra carbs, and then you see how your blood sugars are going. And if they start to return to normal, great. It's been more of an insulin resistance problem. On the other hand, if you feel like you're starving yourself and you're really thin, and it's not the issue that you're not taking in carbohydrates, you don't feel that your liver is stuffed or anything like that, and then you eat a meal, and even though you eat a low carb, say 15 to 30 grams, but your blood sugar really spikes, that's probably pointing more to that your pancreas is not making enough insulin. So it's always a bit of both for people that are type 2, because we're always going to have some insulin insufficiency, because there are people that are very, very overweight that have plenty of, fat stored and fatty liver and tons of calories stored, but their pancreas is able to make so much more insulin that they still don't have abnormal blood sugars, because their pancreas is able to make more. So there's always a relative amount of insufficiency of your pancreas. And it's kind of like, well, what is it? Is it more insufficiency, or is it more too much storage? But yes, there's not a test for it. It's kind of subtle.
Yeah, thank you for that really thoughtful answer. This next question, what are the AC1 levels for diabetes?
So normal A1C is about 4 to up to 5.7. That's what's considered normal number. From 5.7 up to 6.4 is considered pre-diabetes. And then they use 6.5 and up is a diagnosis level. So if your A1C is, once you get to 6.5 and upward, they're going to say, aha, you have diabetes. It's simply a numbers game. We're just kind of trying to cut the population of saying, well, where's the line? Where are we going to call you diabetic versus pre versus normal? Okay, so those are the numbers. The question might be more about what is A1C?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so I could answer that as well. Okay, so A1C is a different way of measuring blood, or measuring, what your blood sugar levels are. So when we're using a meter, for instance, you're pricking your finger, you're putting it on a test strip, you're seeing that's what your blood sugar is at this very point in time. So, okay, I know my blood sugar right now, it's 150. All right, but that's only one point in time, right? And A1C is testing you over 3 months. So it's, it's your average. Golly, that's weird. How do they do that? Right? Okay, so how we do it is we pull your blood out and we look at how much sugar is stuck to your red blood cells. So that's what we're looking at. It's like, it's glucose, because glucose, sugar is glucose. Glucose is sticky. It sticks to stuff, right? It will stick to your red blood cells. And once it's stuck to that red blood cell, it stays there for the lifetime of the red blood cell. A red blood cell lives for 3 months. So red blood cells come from our bone marrow. We make our blood, right? And that red blood cell lives about 3 months, and then it gets old, raggedy, breaks down, and we get rid of it and we make new ones. So I like to say we get an oil change every 3 months. We get all fresh blood. So now, if there's a normal concentration of the bloodstream, if we have normal concentration, most of the time, our concentration in our blood of blood sugar is about 97. So we're walking around, blood sugar is about 80. We pop up after a meal, but we come right back down. So that's, looks like an EKG. So if you averaged out throughout the whole day, average glucose level is 97. That's our concentration, okay? At that concentration of blood sugar, glucose, again, is sticky, and it will still stick to the red blood cell. Only about maybe 5% of the protein has sugar stuck to it. So that's a way that we're saying, okay, if we have 5% A1C or 5% sugar stuck to the red blood cell, we're saying, okay, that's what a normal concentration, that's how it looks when the concentration of glucose is normal. But as our sugar is higher, it's more sticky. right? Sugar's stickier. So it's literally more glucose stuck to the red blood cell. So once it gets to be 6.5% sugar is stuck, we're saying, oh, okay, that is a reflection that the average glucose level is 140, not 97, but 140. That's where we say, okay, that's what we're going to call diabetes. It's an average concentration of 140. Okay. Then the recommendation is, and that's just your diagnostic level. Now, the ADA has said they've studied A1C a lot, and they've determined that when people keep their A1C below 7%, and 7% means you have an average glucose concentration of about 155. So if you're keeping it below 7%, or that's your average concentration below 155, you have a much less risk for having complications from diabetes. So complications of diabetes has to do with how much sugar is stuck to things, right? What are complications from diabetes? Complications of diabetes happens because sugar is sticky and it sticks to stuff and it gums up the works. Okay. It sticks to your arteries, it sticks to your eyes, it sticks to your kidneys. So basically it's like, how sticky are you? So keeping it below 7% keeps us healthy.
Thank you for
Long
that.
answer, sorry. One of
No,
my answers has to be like 5 minutes.
I thought that was so helpful. Thank you. Could you review the purpose of beta cells again, very briefly?
Yes. Okay. So beta cells are the very specialized cells inside the pancreas that make insulin for us. Yeah. And they're sensitive little cells, they actually die off with stress.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, I don't mean stress like, oh, psychological stress. I mean that, with working too hard. So if people that, it drives me crazy. I work in a hospital as well, and every day I get people that come into the hospital, sometimes simply because of diabetes, or they have, a foot wound or something. And it turns out that their blood sugars are really high and they've been drinking soda for years. It hurts my heart because, soda, it's like blood sugar or juice, and it just smacks our body up with the sugar. And then it makes your beta cells have to produce the insulin really, makes them work really hard. So anytime the beta cells are working hard to produce insulin, eventually they can't keep up and they die off. Some people that have been exposed to Agent Orange is also it's toxic to beta cells. So many people who were in the Vietnam War exposed to Agent Orange also go on to develop diabetes.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So there's some environmental factors. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So stress in general, when we're under stress, our body produces, adrenaline and cortisol, and those things that we naturally produce under stress makes our blood sugar go up. And of course, we think that it does that so that we have that glucose in our bloodstream, so that we have, sugar to burn, as we're maybe running away. But, chronic stress, constantly increasing blood sugars is another big factor with, progression of diabetes, because it is that type of stress on the body as well. Poor sleep, chronic stress, chronic bad diet. Yeah, all these things. Of course, then there's still some people that just, power through it. Maybe they just have really good, strong pancreases. No matter what, they don't develop diabetes. But, it's like that kind of genetic factor where maybe we don't have a super strong pancreas. Plus, then we also have all these other factors.
We have 2 questions left. One of them is actually about fatty liver disease. Without a medical diagnosis, is it possible to tell if you have fatty liver disease? Does abdominal fat determine a fatty liver disease?
Yeah, that's a good question. It usually does go hand in hand. Um, Probably, so I used to work with a GI, a gastroenterologist doc, and the gastroenterologists, they study, of course, the whole gut, and the liver is part of that. And this particular doc was a very funny guy, but he said, we all have fatty liver. Any of us that are fat that have fatty liver, because, that's why we're fat. We store liver in our fat. So it's probably true that most of us do have fatty liver, but we especially have it with the body type, right? Some people maybe get away with not having any at all. The people that have maybe the nice pear shape, where you store extra fat maybe on the legs and the thighs. But then we have a lot more fatty liver of people that are the apple shape, where you store most of your calories right around your abdomen, and then your legs and your arms tend to be much more thin, right? Essentially, we don't store calories very well right under the skin, and especially in the extremities, in the arms and legs. So we don't distribute our fat well. So people that have that apple body type are much, much more prone to fatty liver. That is indeed what is happening, is that we eat our calories, and your calories get digest from your stomach and your intestines, and then it goes to the liver first. And then the liver usually will mobilize fat out of the liver and send it to the other parts of the body. But those of us that were not great at storing it to the other parts of the body, it stays in the liver. And so then that's the fatty liver. So I think that those of us with that type of body type, that's the apple body type, we probably should be on a lower carb diet than others. We don't tolerate extra carbohydrates as well as the pear body types. Okay. So many people have fatty liver. Many people have fatty liver, but is it a problem or not? Okay. A lot of people walk around with fatty liver all their lives, and that's just okay. But it's when the liver gets inflamed and cirrhotic. So that is actually right there what they're really trying to study, is how do we know if we have the inflammatory bad fatty liver? What we always used to have to do is a biopsy to know that, to see if there's inflammation and cirrhosis of the liver. Now here's where I'm probably just a little bit, I have just enough knowledge to be dangerous. So gastroenterologists are trying to figure out the difference is if you have a problem with fatty liver. And I don't know exactly what they're doing. I know that there's new stuff out there to determine rather than doing a biopsy, but I'm not sure what that is. I'm not sure if you can just determine that from a simple ultrasound. So if you're really concerned, and if you have anything in your family where you have, some cirrhosis and inflammation, possibly they would check the CRP, which is, let's see, I can't remember what that stands for. It's an inflammatory marker. So if you have high inflammation in your body, that might recommend that you see a gastroenterologist to answer that question.
This last question is whether you have a recommendation for a good diabetic cookbook.
Oh, golly. No, that's not my style, because I'm not a big cookbook person, but I would have a recommendation to get a subscription to the American Diabetes Association's magazine. They have a magazine called Diabetes Forecast. And that magazine is actually really fun to read. They have interesting, fun articles, anything from coping to foot care. Like there's always, fun and interesting, and they talk about new products, and always good sections of food and recipes. But, otherwise I would say, hey, just, go to the bookstore, and there's so many, recipes. There's so many books out there. So just be kind of a matter of picking up what looks fun to read to you. you know, but yeah, Diabetes Forecast magazine, subscribe. It's really good. And I don't work for the American Diabetes Association, but that magazine is a really good one.
It's a great recommendation.